expectations are changing too. Let's talk about looking back the other way from the agency towards the client. Expectations are changing. Timeframes in particular shutting down as everybody wants everything done now, done tomorrow, done for next Monday. Is there a problem here in the level of expectation now as well?
I got a good question, so. Yeah, I think the time frame problem, it's always going to be there. I mean, people, there's always pressure from the clients, for they've got to hit deadlines, they've got, budget cycles they've got to hit, they've got to get money spent within their marketing cycles. That's never going to go away, and I think we just have to adapt, I think, as a whole industry to that thing. We always bitch about timelines not being enough. There's not enough time to develop digital. The TVCs, the planners spent too much time, faffing around. The creative didn't have enough time. I think client side, creative side, digital, everyone's complaining about time. I personally think we just have to get over it because it's not going to change.
But don't you think that the tools have, sorry to interrupt, but don't you think the tools have kind of changed as well? It's like, people complain like, oh, back in my day we used to have, 4 weeks to think about an ad and go down to the, pub and talk about it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yes, but back then you also had to get pencils out and sharpen them and actually sketch a freaking thing onto paper that you then had to go and get someone to duplicate. It's like now you punch a freaking file through the internet and it's in China in 10 seconds. You've saved a fair bit of, like the processors have.
I think that can shave in some areas, but I mean, it still takes time to come up with an idea. It might take 10 seconds and you've cracked something which changes the business completely, or you could spend 6 months and get nowhere. You know what I mean? That's not something you can really put a fixed amount on. And I guess the things you're talking about, they really help to deliver product. It's much easier to deliver certain sorts of products these days, but it still takes a certain amount of time to go through and meet every network owner and have a conversation with them about what rates we can get for our clients. That still takes time. It's people's diaries. I think it's just one of those things. Complaining about time, I'm personally I'm always time poor. I don't know anyone in the room who thinks they've got too much time.
And not enough money.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the money thing I think we can work with. The time, I just think we have to suck it up. I mean, that's my point of view.
Well, coming back to your earlier point about embedding, is it ultimately like a marriage where the two sides constantly think the other one doesn't understand them? Is there something to genuinely to be gained in putting people in because you might understand better the processes of clients?
Absolutely. Also, it saves, in the case I've been referring to, it saves a phenomenal amount of money for the client in that brand managers get on with managing brands rather than digital agencies, which, the whole thing around having a media agency, a creative agency, a digital agency, and experiential or whatever goes on, you basically then have to have one person managing that, which could be a brand manager who also has to deal with the customer, internal stakeholders, and so on and so on. So, I think digital social is about 10% of their job. So if you can take 10% out of their day, then that's a phenomenal saving back to the client. It's also just understanding, being quick to respond in a real-time marketing world.
Do you feel your clients understand reciprocally your processes?
Yeah, I think empathy is a great thing. We've got some really empathetic clients and we've had some unempathetic clients. Thankfully, we have more of the former than the latter these days.
Rowena, I mentioned at the start that the problem is ultimately getting the right talent in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. How do you go about doing that? What do you think are the keys to getting that right?
Tough question. I think it has to be framed in terms of what's your business challenge and, your communication objective. So I think clients need to really own that and do a really good job on that. And, even within J&J, I see a spectrum of quality. I think we all do. So if we're not able to articulate that, then I think it's very difficult to have our agency partners really understand what we're looking for and to help us, find the right talent. And sometimes that talent will be on the agency side, sometimes it will be on the internal side. But if no one, can articulate what we're really trying to achieve, then it's kind of like we're all guessing and we're all in the dark. So I think that's really important. And I think it's also really important to be open to not only what you think you need, but, you know, have the conversation to say, well, what could it look like? So again, coming back to that best practice and next practice, because we're all time poor, so we often all default to what we already know because we can do it faster. And that's pretty normal in terms of behaviour. But given the challenges and also the talent shortage and the opportunity to really create something which may work better because of what's available from technology and touch points, etc., then I think it's really important to stop and ask that question.
Mm-hmm. But from the client's perspective, there used to be a dozen agencies, a few dozen agencies, 100 agencies. Now you've got thousands to choose from. You've got you've got a phone book of options every time you come to a campaign or to an idea. Where do you start?
To be honest, I start with people I know and trust. And I think that's how people work. If I think about the other people I work with internally and externally, you know, they pick up the phone and call people who they believe understand either their business or what they're looking for and can really help them. So I know it's really tough if you're a new business starting out, but I do think it's about, you know, starting to demonstrate, you know, and build that relationship with, you know, a couple of people, and then word of mouth will help, because you will ultimately go back to the people who you think will help you.
So it's a relationship and a trust business in that instance. Damien, you said something the other day about the effect of turnover on that.
Yeah, the other day in our luncheon, we had my perspective on this was slightly mixed. But while I completely agree that you have to have a trust and a relationship, and you know, there's all this fragmentation and stuff happening. There's also kind of these other issues that happen that we don't really recognize the effect that it's having on the work and what we do. And one of those was the fact that now more than ever, people change careers every 2, maybe 3 years. So from, you know, marketer's side, the person who took on the relationship is gone very quickly. Or, you know, if they're really good, to your point, they're in demand. So they might have started out with the best of intentions for the brand. They're like, yep, we're going to completely overhaul it. We're going to do this amazing thing. They get the internal momentum. 18 months, someone pats them on the back and they go, you've been doing a fantastic job with this. We have a bigger fish for you to fry. Come this way. And suddenly you're back to square one again. So it's kind of funny because the same way that from a client side, you're seeking out the best talent within the agency world and kind of following them around, a good agency should really be seeking the best talent from a client side and following them around, because a good client is immensely valuable. A good client knows when to say, I have no idea what I'm doing here, please help. And they know when to say, please back that up because I know what I'm doing here, just don't touch this, right? And you can have that trusted relationship. But if they're moving every 2 years, that means as an agency, you're essentially changing what brand you're working with every 2 years.
Yeah,
Theory.
that was my point, is that, you know, if you have a good relationship and they move somewhere else, I find that often opens more doors than it does close. And there's one client that we've worked with for 10 years, and, you know, I can now say to them, you know what, I've been through this cycle with you guys back in 2002, and, you know, that I get to know the algorithm of their business better than most of the marketing managers do. So, you know, long-term relationships are definitely hard, but, you know, you just got to, there's no silver bullet. You've just got to, as Rowena pointed out, be a trusted advisor and stick to your guns and deal with people with as much integrity as you can.
Aaron, how much of your job working in a big media agency nowadays is effectively brokerage, is matchmaking clients and smaller production units?
Well, I guess none of my job's supposed to be, but quite a lot of it is, bizarrely. I had a very interesting experience yesterday, which I won't reveal here. But yes, I think that this idea of brokerage, that's kind of an interesting term to call it, but I think the point you were making earlier, Rowena, around this idea of being orchestrators, for me, I think this is kind of at the center of what an agency of now or of tomorrow should be about. And it's also why I went media side, because I don't think that any agency personally is able to do everything that's coming up now. You know, there's no value in trying to be the mass generalist across everything. I think what a client needs is they need a lot of people who can do particular things very, very well, like you need awesome, old school TVC building creative agencies who can smash amazing ideas and make amazing television. It's never going to go away. I mean, people talk about the death of TV. I disagree. I think it's going to have a future still. But then you need, guys who understand social media amazingly. You can operate and execute in that. You need guys who can build amazing little digital products, or big digital products, and execute those very, very well. But I think the role for an agency like ours in the media space is we're sitting there, and like it or not, I know this is an interesting thing between creative and media, but we have the client's money to invest, and that's our responsibility to make sure it's invested wisely and correctly and delivers a return for them. So without flying the media flag too high here, I do think that media agencies are kind of uniquely placed to play a role with the client to orchestrate where money goes. And that doesn't mean we should be controlling things, but I think it's up to us to take that responsibility and say, look, we actually think, you should invest X here, X there, and ideally we would be not so much good at doing any of those things, but we should be employing people who are amazing at project management, having that high overarching view, and tell the client, yeah, this bit of the activity, it seems to be going off the rails here. We need to focus on that. This one here is going well, awesome. I think, I'm putting my hand up as a media agency to do that. I don't know if anyone else wants to sort of jump in that kind of a role, but I think simply because of the responsibility and the financial responsibility we have to the client, it makes sense for that to sit into a media sort of type organization. We can call that brokerage if you like, but I guess I prefer to call it something like orchestration, where we're uniquely placed to have a crack at that stuff.
It's actually quite surprising how much friction there is between creative and media agencies that doesn't seem to be really rooted in anything. But that kind of
creative agencies.
But
I worked with them for ages.
But there is, though, like in that kind of menage a trois that is client, media agency, and creative agency, there always seems to be a bit of friction between those two. And again, it's what's the reason behind that?
It is state of origin day to day. Drum up a meaningless rivalry anyway.
Awesome.